Welcome to the next of the We Do B2B Southern SaaS sessions here up at Southern SaaS 2024. We're joined next by Lovina McMurchy, who is the Chief Operations Officer and Chief Product Officer at Crichton and has an amazing journey to share with us here as a Kiwi marketer, product owner, and just awesome human being who is able to share the view back from the other side. So Lovina, welcome to the show. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
So you've just come off stage. You're relatively fresh from your keynote. How was it?
Oh, I think it went pretty well. I mean, I think that this where SaaS is right now is it's getting to a point of, it's been around 10 years. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of, we're entering a phase of maturity, right? And so the opportunities are still there, but they're a little bit kind of harder to find. You need a nuanced approach to how you kind of find sustainable valuable in SaaS, but still tons of opportunities, for Kiwi founders to participate.
Oh, that's fantastic. And so I'm looking through some of the list of places that have made it onto your CV. I mean, there's Amazon, there's Pushpay, there's Movac, there's Microsoft. It's a pretty star-studded career. Take us through your journey.
Yeah, I mean, I like to say I worked for all of the Seattle-based monopolies, which is Starbucks, Amazon, and Microsoft. But so, I spent my first, 30 or so years in New Zealand. I was really lucky to grow up in New Zealand. I think at a time where, we had, tremendous, support for kids of all different socioeconomics to learn, to grow. I grew up in South Auckland, mm-hmm. Went to university, and so it was a great time. And when I was 28, I won a scholarship to go to Harvard Business School. It was fully funded. I always say, I got all of my luck in life in that kind of one moment, and you're better off to have all of your luck condensed into one big thing than have a lot of little bits of luck. So I went off to business school thinking I'll do 2 years at Harvard and then come home. But after Harvard, that you have an opportunity to work for 2 years of work training. And so I went out to Seattle, really because it reminded me of New Zealand.
Okay.
And my first job there was working for Starbucks. It was just after the tech big, web crash.
Yeah.
And it was a fascinating environment to say, how can you take technology services and bring them into this really special, brick and mortar environment. And then once I was there, then you kind of settle in, you put down roots, found a husband, had a couple of kids, and then went on to work for 10 years at Microsoft and then 4 years at Amazon.
And sparked from a scholarship that took you through Harvard and then through coffee. So I'm intrigued. What was the scope at Starbucks? What were you covering there?
Yeah, it was really fascinating. So it was, how do you take, it was called New Ventures. So how do you create new businesses using that base of consumers? The Starbucks consumers are a really special set of people. They're quite tech forward. They're reasonably high kind of socioeconomics, mm-hmm. and their level of relationship to the brand is really high. I mean, it's an addictive substance. People are in Starbucks, it's sometimes twice a day.
Yeah.
One analyst looked at as though it were a cell phone network and said, what's the ARPU? The average revenue per user of a Starbucks customer, and it was higher than most cell phone companies. So it's a tremendous environment, and they've always wanted to continue reinventing themselves. And so the idea is, how can we bring technology into the stores in really appropriate ways? Yeah. And the first problem we tackled was, how do you speed up the line? Because it's not, it's a discretionary purchase. Yep. If there's 10 people in front of you, then, you just do an abandon.
Yep.
And back then all the stores were on dial-up. So the credit card processing was very slow. Yeah. It was hard to do things like store training of employees. You've got 100,000 employees at that time. Yeah. And so our big project was really putting high-speed T1 band communication into mm-hmm. stores that would enable things like employee training, but also internet service front of house for customers. Yep. It was the first national Wi-Fi network in America. It was the one place you could go and you knew you'd be able to get on the internet back before it was everywhere. So It was really an important part of the store experience. And then because all the credit card processing was through that same, bandwidth, we managed to, get your coffee to you more quickly. And then we went from there to phone-based ordering. So why wait in the line at all, right? Why don't you use an app, to order your coffee in advance and come and pick it up?
Pick it up.
So, I look back, I've done many things in my career, but in some ways I'm still most proud of the time I was at Starbucks, because I can look at the services I created and they're still there.
That's what a legacy. That's fantastic.
Yeah, and everyone can relate to it, right? So it's a lot easier than talking about my time in Windows.
Yeah. And certainly around about that same time, XP versus a cup of coffee, you probably had a much better experience with the coffee than you did with XP.
Yeah, you got a lot less complaints anyway.
Okay, and now Crichton. So take us through your role there, and take us, for the viewers at home who don't know, what's Crichton in a nutshell?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'd start by saying I spent 5 years as a venture capitalist here in New Zealand, and I kind of thought at the back of my mind, if I spend a lot of time looking at Kiwi companies, I might fall in love with one of them.
Okay.
And Crichton was actually the last investment I did within that particular fund. So it was coming to the end of the fund. Anyway, we deployed all our capital. And it was a particularly special business. I'll tell you what it does, and then I'll tell you why it was special. But it's very technical. We are making an operating system.
Okay.
And if you think about operating systems, you've got Windows, you've got Linux.
Yeah.
Do you know what? There's not too many operating systems out there across the last 20 years. Building a new operating system is incredibly bold and aggressive.
In a market, like you said, that's saturated and dominated.
That's right. But our belief is that the operating systems that exist today are really a function of the past and a function of times where there was a lot less concern around cybersecurity, where hardware was less was less powerful. Right, so you didn't have the same processing speeds, and we didn't live in an IoT world. Right now, machines run the world, and I don't mean
the
internet
Matrix,
connected, thermometers. I mean our cars are becoming software connected. We rely on communication systems. The grid, energy grid, is increasingly software connected. Machines, ventilators, heart machines, software connected. And so as we see intelligent machines become connected to the internet, the foundation of software that runs them is really important. And the existing operating systems are really not able to kind of meet the security needs of these new breed of software-defined and intelligent devices. And so we're trying to reinvent them.
Wow.
Yeah, and how did I find this company, and why is it special to me? Crazy, but the founder is an American guy, Boyd Maltera, from Wisconsin. And he spent 17 years at Microsoft. So that was the weirdest thing for me, to have been at Microsoft for 10 years, come home here to New Zealand, and then meet a bunch of old Microsoft people that had also moved to New Zealand. And so it was sort of that kind of crossover between, this is my home country and I want to be involved in a really big, bold idea, but yet it's with people that also understand that other part of my life, having spent 20 years in the US.
Wow.
And so I couldn't walk past it. I mean, the level of technical leadership in the business, it's unusual to find businesses here. We've got good businesses, but ones where you really look at it and say, boy, we're trying to do something that no one else in the world can do.
Wow.
And so that's what really attracted me to Crichton.
I see that. So you have a number of different lenses on the New Zealand tech landscape. I mean, you are a Kiwi.
Yep.
You've invested in Kiwi companies.
Yep.
And you're now based in the US and, looking back over the water and seeing what's happening over here. So what are your observations from afar?
My observation, well, I mean, I think, generally, the VC industry across 20 years here, and the tech startup scene across 20 years, 20, when I left, I would say it's pre-internet times, because TradeMe didn't exist, right? So just winding back, 1998, like we had nothing. Technology, maybe banks used it, but there wasn't really, you couldn't see the impact in society. And it's been a slow burn. It often is when you're starting a tech ecosystem. I think the next 10 years that was kind of post-internet, it was hard, it was slow, there wasn't enough capital. It was just a very kind of difficult time. But ecosystems, tech ecosystems reach some tipping point where they just take off. And some of it's about access to capital. Some of it's about having founders that have found success. They can go on and inspire other founders. But there are also some factors in there, I think, that were around COVID. You know, COVID was a time where there was a tremendous amount of venture capital in the world. VCs had trouble deploying it because their hands were so hot with money. So they needed to go out of their way to find opportunities that were fairly valued.
Yeah.
And back in the day, you know, their mindset was, hey, I'm a Silicon Valley VC. If you're more than 20 minutes away from my office, I'm not interested, right? So that was hard for Kiwis to get US capital. But during COVID, all of that changed. All the meetings moved to Zoom.
Yeah.
And at that point, why does it matter where you are?
That pace of change was so rapid.
It was so rapid. And so I think that change really opened up the US VCs to really look globally for good founders and for good deals. That would give them returns. And now we're in a post-COVID phase. I don't think that's changed. So it's a permanent change that really, I think, helps Kiwis get access to foreign markets.
So when you're when you're rubbing shoulders with the people that you rub shoulders with over in the US, and you say, I'm Lovina, or I'm from New Zealand.
Yeah.
What's the response? How do people perceive that origin? Do they understand your accent, first and foremost? Do you have to repeat yourself?
Often they don't understand my accent, especially in America. They do struggle with it. So you need to try and talk real slow, and that can help. But the first question out of their mouths is always, why did you come back?
Well, that's good. Okay.
Yeah, so I think that a lot of Americans really do have this dream of and it's a reflection of the worry, the pressures, of America, the concern for the future. There's a lot of anxiety in America, and I think many people have this dream of having a ripcord they could just pull, and just if things get so bad they want to get out. And now most of them aren't going to do that, but it is something that there's that kind of constant dream. So they can't understand why I've come back. That's kind of the first question. But very much, New Zealand is regarded as a special place, kind of a leader in the world in terms of our idealism, our degree of innovation. I think there's not a huge depth around what we do from a tech point of view. I tell people how successful we are, for example, in the space industry and in rocket ships, satellites, and they literally don't believe it. They assume that we'd be great at agri-tech.
Yep.
So if you talk to them about Halter, totally makes sense.
Yeah, they're there.
And when you explain to them why we're particularly good at SaaS businesses that target SMB, because we're a nation of SMB businesses, then they kind of nod their heads.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's certainly a lot of an interest in what we're doing.
What then are the knowledge gaps? So you kind of talked about the fact that there's an association that, of course you guys are going to be good at agri-tech because it's green and you're full of cows or whatever, or sheep, I suppose, is the other perception as well. What else is seen and what else is missed? Yeah,
I think we do have some good basic science and deep tech businesses, and I think that's where the understanding isn't there. Whether it's innovation around things like bioengineering, pharmaceuticals, materials science, they wouldn't necessarily assume that we're good at that. And I think it's not across the board. There's just some little caches of technology that we've particularly been strong at. If you think about power by proxy and wireless charging, we invented that, right? Everyone around the world who uses Apple products is using technology that was invented in a New Zealand university.
I feel like I should have known that. So.
Yeah, probably should.
That's a bit embarrassing.
Because we don't have this, our universities maybe the same level of name brand recognition, and there isn't an assumption of that. And so I think kind of educating them about like some of the real kind of centers of excellence and photonics and lasers. I mean, there's so many interesting things that you're seeing come out of New Zealand. I think they understand that our general population is well educated, is hardworking, so we get kind of credit for that. I think they understand that the kind of the relative cost of labor, there's some arbitrage here because it's not quite as expensive to hire an engineer in Auckland as San Francisco, but those are some of the gaps. It's
interesting that you say that there's a perception that we're hardworking when we're a nation with a productivity issue. I mean, that's an interesting kind of mismatch there. Okay, so one thing that I would like to kind of dig into, given that our audience primarily is B2B marketers, what could
Actually, can I respond to that? Because that's an interesting challenge. Like, are we hardworking? I might have misstated that a little bit. Like, it's not so much that we're hardworking, because Americans do work harder, right? Many countries around the world have people that work harder. It's that more we're pragmatic. Like, I think a Kiwi could understand what are the things that move the needle, and they're capital efficient. They get a lot done with little.
Okay.
So it's probably more about like output per person. Like they're amazed when they see some of our startups, how much has been accomplished with so little money and such small teams.
Right, so there's a resourcefulness element there.
Yes,
Okay. Oh, that's a trait that we can wear with as a badge of honor.
Yes, that's
absolutely. Right. So what else, looking at that, through the lens of the B2B marketer who is communicating into the US, or, promoting the origin story of their business into the US. What are some of the hot buttons? What do you know of that market that says, okay, well, you put this in market and you showcase this in front of them and you're selling the dream?
And I would say there's been a tremendous change, over the last 5 years. I mean, in the early days, or kind of the middle age of SaaS, the go-to-market was, this whole product-led growth thing. Every VC wanted to hear how you could be a product-led growth company. And what does that mean? It means that you have a product that's super easy to adopt. Maybe there's a trial version of it. You don't even have to get a credit card. You come into some team inside a big company, you get them using it, right? So you've got a foothold, and then you do a land and expand, right? And that works super well. And there was a lot of opportunity for different solutions that were needed. So people were interested in what new services could help them improve their businesses. Now you roll forward 5 years, and because SaaS has such a low barrier to entry, most companies in America are awash with SaaS services.
They've got that many logins and that many things.
That many logins, because all of this, that department ordered this one, this other department ordered something else, and none of them even connect. Like, you've got all these shadow IT problems. And so we're at a time where enterprises are looking at it and going, I don't know if I want 200 SaaS products, honestly.
Can I have 4?
And I liked SaaS at first because it was like I didn't have to have really high upfront cost to buy a box product and buy servers. It was just this little monthly charge. But now I've got 200 little monthly charges. It's actually quite expensive, and they don't connect. Where the heck is my data? It's sitting with all these SaaS vendors. And so the move at the moment, particularly as the economy has slowed down, is to say, how do I consolidate? How do I simplify? And I'd rather have fewer vendors who are selling me suites of products rather than just have a one point solution. So I think it's become a lot harder for SaaS marketers if you're trying to market a point solution. And then some of the outreach, how do you get that initial foothold? That's become harder. As SaaS enters a period of kind of climbing the slope into maturity, that's a time where the GTM becomes extremely efficient, almost scientific, right? Like, to be in that game, you can't be slapdash. And there's a lot of competition and a lot of noise to cut through. So most of us in business, every morning when we open our inboxes, you have 10 mails from different SaaS vendors, and it's the whole GTM of SaaS has also been SaaSified, right? So companies like Outreach, great company, love it, right? But it's what it's been doing for the last 5 years is saying, how do I give leverage to your SDRs by automating a lot of their workflows? Well, I'll just write the email for you.
Yeah.
Now, what I see as a customer is a bunch of vanilla, dear blank, I'm so impressed at how you do blank. Have you considered a new payroll solution?
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, delete.
Yeah, get me off your onboarding.
And it's also kind of cutting through, for example, some of the, if you were to do that through email marketing, there'd be unsubscribes. But these emails, because they're semi-written by a human, don't have unsubscribe buttons. And because they don't have unsubscribe buttons, it's leading to this massive volume of automated outreach that isn't really targeted. Because what's the cost? Why target, right?
Yeah.
Just, you can fill someone's inbox.
Yeah, if you can saturate without actually having to spend the money and time on the segmentation and targeting piece, absolutely.
That's right, but it's not cutting through. And then if you really have a message where you have targeted it, unfortunately, you're stuck in this like delete, because I don't even want to read these mails anymore. I think, I think that as a marketer, it's very important not to follow those models because they are failing. You need to be creative and find other different ways of cutting through with your audience. So I think that's really going to be important. And I think at some point soon too, the notion of why is it okay for you to fill my inbox with the spam? It's really spam. It's not really a person. It's really an algorithm.
Yes.
Like, how is that really different to sending me a newsletter that I didn't sign up for the list?
Yeah.
So I also think that those models have a pretty limited shelf life.
I mean, the focused inbox as well, as soon as that came in for Outlook, that was just you saw the email rates, the open rates just drop off a cliff.
Yeah.
And there's going to be no way that some of those automated AI-generated content, like that's going to start to get picked up. It has to somewhere along the line. And that's just going to get shelved. And before you know it, this once lucrative window into the market will be closed.
Yes.
And at that point, you've got to have something else, and you've got to have that creative lens, and you've got to you've got to have another horse in the race, basically.
I think the other thing I'd call out about the GTM is that as SaaS companies grow bigger and offer suites of solutions, they obviously have a GTM advantage because they can amortize their cost of acquisition across multiple products in the family. So I think if you're being a single point solution, getting the economics of customer acquisition to work is very challenging.
Yeah.
Very challenging.
Yeah, I see that. So there's probably lessons to be learned from other people who've gone through that journey. So what I'd kind of like to ask as a bit of a wrap-up question here is, what is the role of community in the software as a service space? I mean, we're here at a Kiwi SaaS community event. What role does that network and that community have to play in shaping and progressing the sector? Yeah,
I mean, I think back in the day before we had that community, founders had to make their own mistakes. And I think in the early days of SaaS, because there was so much opportunity, sometimes you could even afford to make mistakes. You could afford to learn slowly. But given the pace that we see now, the level of competition, like you can't afford to make mistakes. And so how do you learn from other people's mistakes? So that you're kind of wise, you're armed with the knowledge, going into your business. I think that's really important. And I think that, community exists everywhere. US has, fantastic founder communities as well. But there is definitely something special about being part of that kind of Kiwi network where every founder is really willing to get behind and help every other founder. I have actually in the Crichton business, because we are government focused from a sales point of view, actually also got a great deal of help from New Zealand Trade and Enterprise. So leveraging New Zealand's state level relationships in a way to get introductions for us and to create kind of credibility. So we've really felt we've benefited a lot from being part of the Kiwi community.
That's such a really, really good to hear. It's actually heartwarming, to be honest.
Yeah, good.
Knowing that having come from here and gone over there, you can still look back and say, yeah, there is something here. There is still something special about it here. I'm going to ask you one last question because you talked about learning from mistakes. What's the mistake that you learned from the most?
Oh, okay, I'm going to have to pause and think about that one.
I like your original comment about having all of your luck concentrated on one moment in time. That was great, but I don't know that you could plan for that.
No, exactly.
Or what's the steepest learning curve, perhaps is another way of phrasing that you've gone through?
I think those are very different questions.
Cool.
Yeah.
Choose which one you'd like to answer. Or both.
Well, I mean, I think for me, the steepest learning curve was coming and being a VC later in my career. You know, I'd had 20 years of operating experiences in big tech companies. And when you're in a big tech company, I created a lot of new services, right? So you go, yeah, I'm like an entrepreneur, right?
Yeah.
I've created new things. And you haven't, right?
Okay.
Because Amazon and Microsoft and Starbucks, all these companies, they already have customers.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
So when you're launching a new service, I mean, you're building product. I think you really learn how to build products, but you get to cheat because the go-to-market piece of it is handed to you on a platter.
Yeah,
right?
You've got a brand that people know, and you've got customers.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's right. You're Amazon, you're Microsoft. So you come into the market with credibility, you come in with an audience. All your problems in go-to-market is, well, all my other peer groups are also trying to get access to the marketing lists and be at the top of the newsletter or whatever, be on the homepage. How do I get my share of voice relative to all the other things the company is doing?
Yeah.
But that's not the same as being a startup and saying, I'm nobody.
Yeah, please
And I
come
have
spend some money.
nothing to leverage, and I've got limited money, and I've got to go out and find customers and to convince them of my product. And so coming back and kind of learning, how do you really do that? Because it's not, you don't learn any of that when you're in a big company.
No.
That was a very steep learning curve. And then going from there into venture capital, where I had a lot of very good operating experience. I think many founders that I work with found that valuable, but I had no investing experience at all. And I had, a couple of mentors that really worked with me through that period. David Beard from Movac was amazing. Randy Commissar, from Kleiner Perkins, people that really took me under their wing.
Yeah.
And I was so fascinated that I read voraciously, So I think your initial question was, tell me when you kind of failed. And I definitely have lots of failures in my career I can talk about, but it's that coming into something totally new that there was so much I didn't know and understand, and having the opportunity to go and learn it. It was just one of the most incredible, periods of my life, from all my career, just from having the insatiable learning and mastering, something, totally new. So it was fantastic. Okay, the failure one. Okay, I process this now. So I'll tell the story from the point of view of I loved working at Amazon.
Yep.
I loved the leadership values of Amazon. I learnt so much there. One of the most important leadership values at Amazon is customer obsession.
Okay.
I talked a lot about this today on stage, and I'd launched many products. Some were successful and some were not. The one that was most challenging, where I don't believe we had market success, was the last one I worked on, which was Alexa shopping.
Okay.
And this was always a dream, of Jeff Bezos's, right? From the moment he had the napkin and he, drew the first little sketch of Alexa, it was always like, wow, people will have these things in their home and they'll speak to them and they'll tell Alexa what they need, bring me some tomatoes or whatever. And then a drone will come and drop it out of the sky, and then maybe one day we'll have a chip and we'll put it in people's brain. He didn't really say that, but it was that idea of we can reinvent shopping through this device. And I feel that we didn't meet our goals, for making voice-based shopping prevalent. And if I look back and say, well, why were we not able to? We had all the resources in the world, literally a blank check. We had tons of the best people at Amazon. We had Jeff's attention. And at the end of the day, it's because we didn't use our own leadership value of customer obsession. Because you know what? People don't want to shop with their voice, right? They can shop with their computer, they can shop with their phone. They've already got tons of ways that they can shop easily. And so that's one of the risks, I think, of being somebody in technology that loves technology, that loves the idea of technology.
That's a really interesting angle.
That, you fall in love with these ideas that you actually haven't validated with customers, right? You want them to be true. You want this dream, this science fiction to be true without really listening to what people's real needs are.
And that must be quite sobering as well, that to have got, the napkin sketch and the robots and the drones and
make it happen.
Yeah, sorry, Jeff, no one wants it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Should have just listened.
They were hard conversations.
Yeah, I bet. But I mean, hats off to you for having them. And it's a really it must have been a wild ride.
Well, but to your point, it's the thing. Failure is what teaches you, and I think you can read in a manual, we care about customers, but it's only when you really fail at launching a product that it really teaches you the value, right?
Yeah.
Which is, hey, we weren't customer obsessed enough to really pull this one off, right? So it was a great lesson.
I think it's a wonderful place to put a pin in the conversation because we're out of time, unfortunately, but it was such an enjoyable conversation, and thank you for sharing the journey and all of the insights. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Tim.